He arrived on the 6th of August, 1775.
30 miles a day.
Captured at the ill-fated attack of Quebec on the eve of the new year, 1776. He was held prisoner for over a year, finally exchanged in January 1777. And whatever the trade was, the British got the worst of the deal. Promoted to colonel and placed in charge of the 11th Virginia Continentals. He trained his men in light infantry tactics. Later, he was given command of the Provisional Rifle Corps, a light infantry unit of 500 picked riflemen. Remember, at the time, the main weapon on the battlefield was the musket. The musket was not accurate beyond 50 yards. Okay, and yet the rifle, although slow to load, was a killing instrument at 300 yards. At the Battle of Freeman's Farm, New York, during the Saratoga campaign, Morgan's riflemen killed every officer in British General Simon Fraser's advance party at the first exchange of fire. Every single officer. This was something that the British had never experienced before, the targeting of officers. There's a lesson for today. And they forced a British retreat at Freeman's Farm. Now later, the British came on again, and Morgan's men broke up formation after formation and charge after charge with accurate rifle fire from the woods on the far side of the field. Shortly afterward, at the Battle of Bemis Heights, on October 7th, 1777, Morgan was once again assigned to deal with Fraser's forces. Fraser, the best field commander in the British General Burgoyne's command, was rallying his men when Morgan ordered him shot by rifleman Tim Murphy. Murphy shinnied up a tree, and from his perch in a swaying tree, now imagine, those of you who are riflemen now understand, he's in a tree, the wind is blowing, the tree is swaying, his target is 300 yards away.
Let's go.
Murphy took that incredible shot, mortally wounded, first killed Fraser's horse, then mortally wounded Fraser, and the British attack petered out. This set the stage for the culmination of the Saratoga battle and the surrender of Burgoyne's entire force. The British defeat at Saratoga brought the French into the war on the Patriot side. Tim Murphy, at Dan Morgan's order, had fired the single most important rifle shot in the Revolution. The single most, even more so, I would say, than the one that opened the ball at Lexington and Concord. Now, Morgan soldiered on in the Continental cause. He wasn't politically well connected, and he was repeatedly passed over for promotion by the Continental Congress. Finally, disgusted by the politics, his poor health, his legs and back still in awful pain from the abuse he had suffered in the Quebec fiasco, he was allowed to resign on June 30th, 1779, and he returned home to Winchester, Virginia. After the disaster at Camden, when Horatio Gates left the battlefield ahead of his defeated army, riding as fast as he could go,
killing 3 horses on the way to Halifax.
Exactly. Morgan decided to rejoin the army and see if he could help salvage the Patriot cause in the Carolinas. Excuse me, this is obviously someone that doesn't understand what I'm doing here. In any case, they'll have to wait. Now, when Gates was replaced by the new department commander, Nathaniel Greene, Morgan was ordered to take his light infantry force of about 700 men to the back country of South Carolina, where he was to forage and harass the enemy while avoiding direct battle. Cornwallis sensed an opportunity to defeat the rebel army in detail, so he dispatched Tarleton and his British Legion to track Morgan down and crush him. He even gave him some British regulars, light infantry, to go with him to accomplish the job. Now, eager to avoid either another Waxhaw or another Camden, Morgan did something that was extremely rare at the time for a troop commander to do. He sought the advice of the men in his command who had fought Tarleton previously. He sought clues to his enemy, seeking from their experience and knowledge of the enemy the best way to defeat him. Morgan found a way, he thought, and he spent the night before the battle circulating among his troops who were huddled around campfires trying to keep warm, explaining the plan and what was expected of them. making his stand at Cowpen, South Carolina on January 17, 1781. Morgan's plan took advantage of Tarleton's tendency for quick action and his low opinion of American militia. And he also took advantage of the long-range killing power of his own rifles. Positioned in 3 separate lines of battle with his marksmen to the front, his militia in the second line, and his regulars to the rear. Each was shielded by foliage and dips and folds in the ground. Morgan took care that each line was within the supporting distance of the other, and he took care that each of his men knew exactly and precisely what he was expected to do. The marksmen were to fire until seriously threatened, then retire off to the flanks or through the militia in the second line. The side of the militia fleeing encouraged Tarleton to order a charge, and then Dan Morgan hoped they would smack up against the second line of marksmen and militia. The same thing would happen, but with the militia withdrawing into the woods on either side, putting them in a position where they could throw in flanking fire as Tarleton's force came forward. The British took the bait. The tactic resulted in a classic double envelopment. In less than 1 hour, a British force of 1,076 men suffered 110 killed, 830 captured, with more than 200 of those wounded. Tarleton barely escaped with his life, riding much like Gates after Camden, as fast as his horse could take him. And he left his reputation behind on the battlefield. When Tarleton reached Cornwallis and he reported the disaster, Cornwallis placed his sword tip on the ground. And as the bad news came in, one sentence at a time, he kept leaning and leaning on the sword until finally the pressure broke his sword in half. Coming in the wake of the American debacle at Camden, and added together with the victory against Ferguson's forces at Kings Mountain, Cowpens was a surprising victory against a force containing British regulars and under a commander who had never before lost an engagement. The spell of bloody band Tarleton was broken decisively, and Cowpens marked a psychological turning point in the war, encouraging the revolutionaries and demoralizing the British and the Tories. Cowpens set in motion a series of events that led here to Guilford Courthouse and to General Nathaniel Greene, our fourth man that shaped the battle here, and ultimately the war. Nathaniel Greene was born the son of a Quaker farmer and iron forger at Potawatomi, Rhode Island in 1742. Although his father's Quaker sect discouraged literary accomplishments, Greene educated himself in mathematics and the law, and likewise promoted public schools in his home district. This was before, I point out, that public schools had become government schools.
Right.
Quote, "Learning is not virtue," Greene once said, "but the means to bring us to an acquaintance with it. Integrity without knowledge is weak and useless. Knowledge without integrity is dangerous and dreadful. Let these be your motives to action throughout life: the relief of the distressed, the detection of frauds, the defeat of oppression, and the diffusion of happiness." In August 1774, mind you, 1774, this is before Lexington and Concord by several months, he organized a Rhode Island militia company, which, after it was organized, refused to elect him an officer because he walked with a limp. Greene went along anyway as a private. At this time, he began to acquire many expensive volumes on military tactics and began to teach himself the art of war. Because of this, he was expelled from the Quakers. On May 8, 1775, he was promoted in one leap from private to Brigadier General of Rhode Island Army of Observation during the siege of Boston. 6 weeks later, he was appointed a Brigadier of the Continental Army. He must have been one hell of a private to deserve a jump to general.